Oh, hey everybody. So I'm realizing that I'm awfully blurry. Let me see if I can bring that. Nope. All right. Well, we'll get it anyway. Welcome everyone. So if you don't know me, my name is Jeff. I'm the CXO of YOM. YOM is a DPIN that is built specifically for pixel streaming games or cloud gaming to any browser, any computer. We break down that barrier, that hardware barrier, and let people play a game on any device, a mobile device, a low-end laptop. But these are high-quality, AAA quality games. Had a very busy week this week at YOM. If you've been part of the community, you've seen that we've done the token bridge on Monday. We launched the accelerator program for game studios to bring on board on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, yesterday, we announced formally our partnership with MetaGravity. So let me bring on CEO Rashid Mansoor and welcome him to the show. Hey, Rashid, how are you?
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Thanks. Let me give a quick introduction to what MetaGravity is and the reason we're excited to have you on board the talk today. So MetaGravity is a visionary deep tech company building the foundational infrastructure for the next generation of online games and the future 3D internet. MetaGravity empowers creators with the tools to push the boundaries of what's possible, fostering a decentralized future for the internet. Their flagship product, the Quark HyperScale Engine, is a revolutionary network engine that allows game developers to construct supermassive multiplayer worlds with ease, minimizing the cost and the time. This innovative technology unlocks the potential for groundbreaking digital experiences, paving the way for never before seen worlds. So that's why it's exciting, because obviously their technology, our technology, both found a way. We realize that decentralization is a path to make the 3D internet. And so while we'll talk a bit about the technology today, I'm also very curious to talk about our theses, because I think we have the same thesis for what's going to happen in the future to the internet and how our infrastructure helps to make this happen. So welcome to the show, Rashid, again.
Thank you for having me.
So I always like to start a little bit because I'm curious about people where they got their start, but your background, where you're from, and how you got into technology in the first place. What was it as a young person that said, "Oh, I want to get into computers" and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I got my first computer when I was quite young. It was a 386DX, and I think what got me interested, I got drawn to programming quite early, and in particular game programming, because back then you had to do quite low-level things to do fast real-time graphics. You had to write directly into the video buffers for like VGA, EGA, CGA, the graphics
Gosh,
adapter.
I remember the
Still
days.
sort of off the top of my head, remember some of those, the hexadecimal address spaces which you had to write into, because you had to do it a lot. And then that kind of got me interested in the inner workings of computers, as well as sort of hardware and so on. Ended up starting my first startup when I was like 19. I was building positioning devices using cell towers, so it's cheaper than GPS. Not quite as accurate, but not too far off the mark from civilian GPS, as it was called at the time. It was less accurate than military GPS back then. So that was quite cool, and went and spent a stint in academia, and ended up, both doing electrical engineering, computer science, mechanical engineering. Didn't finish one of those, which is the mechanical. Almost did, finished the other two. Went on to do doctoral research in applied mathematics, working on nonlinear systems. Did a lot of scientific computing, so worked on sort of high performance compute clusters. And sort of that coming out of there, I went on to found a series of startups, which has led me up to MetaGravity.
Yeah. So, and then how did MetaGravity get its start then? What was the mission for you, and why does it excite you?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back all the way back to the mid 2000s. I was interested, as much as I was interested in parallelism and scale of compute for scientific computing applications, I was also sort of on the side interested in, oh, why aren't virtual worlds and games sort of truly immersive? Why can't I go and chop a tree, and then 1,000 other people in that world will see that tree chopped down when they pass by? And why can't a village appear over time built by players, and you have some other village trading with this, they're going to war? Why can't we have that kind of truly kind of flexible, mutable, persistent kind of gameplay, which then gives rise to emergence? And sort of I mulled over it, and discovered that the way that server tech was designed, like, we couldn't deal with the scale and the parallelism. So how do you solve that problem? And the companies I founded in the early sort of 2010s. One was AdBrain, which is an AI for advertising profiling, probabilistic profiling startup. That was back when, even things like, machine learning were very trendy, and deep learning was sort of relatively, relatively fresh, but, more research focused. After that, I went on to build a company called do gaming things, but we're focused on, really the premise was build a supercomputer in the cloud. So we did things in biotech like protein docking. We did genome alignment for various companies. We worked on COVID research during the pandemic, but we also did stuff like we did at the time what was the biggest virtual world simulation, EV. We took the approach the industry was taking to build bigger games, and we built sort of that on our supercomputing layer that allowed us to 10x or even 50x what others could do at the time, in terms of scale, in terms of performance, in terms of cost efficiency. But the technology was still too hard to adopt for gaming and too expensive. So we ended up having lots of defense customers and other types of enterprise digital twin scientific simulation customers.
Yeah, so it started with simulation, and then you went. But did you always have gaming in mind then for this technology? Because you said that's kind of where you started. Even while you were building it for for simulations, you knew that eventually you need to turn it to gaming. And then why make that turn, or what was the driver for you there?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the space of simulation tech, even outside of scaling, or most tech that deals with that sort of thing, you'll see that if you go back even 10 years, there are loads of technologies used in various industries that today you'd be using Unreal Engine and Unity for.
Yeah.
And if you go back 20, 30 years, let's take supercomputers, a lot of the technologies, the hardware built to power supercomputers were niche. But today, they're built on technologies built for games. So there is often something about the ease of use demands, the cost efficiency demands that games impose, and the creativity and the inventiveness that it imposes, that if you truly solve it for games, then you will actually solve it for a much bigger category. Whereas if you solve it for niche categories, the reverse will happen. You will get absolutely destroyed once the optimal solution for gaming starts to break out of that space. So it's quite a common trend. I'm making an inductive argument, and inductive arguments aren't necessarily universally true, but they're often true, right? And so probabilistically speaking, it's quite likely that you will get replaced by something coming out of gaming. So why not focus there and get it really right, get the tech and the product really right?
Yeah, it's smart, because and I don't think people recognize that too. I had worked for a time for a military contractor that was using Unreal to build a Navy ship and using it for training. But again, same thing, because of the constraints that games have, it made it easier for them to make it distributed. They had to the cost becomes less. It becomes the restrictions actually help you get more creative. This happens for most artists anywhere. When you find out you only got 2 pencils in your box, you'll create a piece of art that's different than if you have 8,000, and then even then it becomes you freeze up because of too many choices, right?
Yeah, I think a really good example recently was the stuff coming out of China, like DeepSeek. They had less hardware, less powerful hardware, so they had to find creative ways of making the AI efficient and make it cheap to operate. As a consequence, they made it very cheap to operate. And those kinds of big gains usually come when you think about a problem from first principles and rework it. And that's very much, throughout my career, I've always, with Hadean was a first principles return to how to do distributed computing, high performance distributed computing, supercomputing, if you will, on the cloud. And then MetaGravity was like taking the learnings of the problems we encountered at Hadean and saying, let's go back to first principles and solve these problems once and for all by really thinking originally bottom up, right? So, and DeepSeek is kind of an example of that. And there's lots of innovations that happen that way, right? You have to go back to sometimes first principles rather than add an iterative advance on something that exists.
Yeah, some of the best games. So I don't know if you know my full background, but 25 years in games, and some of the best game directors that I've worked with had that philosophy of, look, we blue sky and we come up with all these creative ideas, but the best ones will thin it down. Let's not do all these things. Let's do very few things, and then we'll figure out a way to make it fun for players within this very small box, as opposed to just, you can't add a new feature to make the game more fun if the core of the game isn't fun first, right? That's a kind of
Yeah,
thing that goes on there. It sounds like it's a very similar approach for what you were doing.
absolutely.
So how did you find YOM? I'm not sure exactly how we first got introduced, and the synergies that we're saying that we want to make games available to people where they already are, which is on any device, but it's through a web browser. If we can allow games to reach players there, get them past the hardware wall of not having to own the expensive gaming computer or the consoles, then we can make it much more available. These massive worlds that you're talking about, much more available to the masses. But again, I'm curious, how did we first get introduced? I know that you have people that are close to our CEO, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was certainly not me who initiated that contact. I don't know who did, whether it was on our side or yours. But there were, maybe my co-founder Tobin,
Yeah, I think
Alan, Felix, maybe him or Toby. Someone on the team might have made that first contact. But I remember being told about you guys and then being introduced, and it was really great. Like we sort of kind of got along really well from the first meeting.
I
So,
understand the two, you and York got caught into a time travel
yeah,
conversation.
I think we did get a bit carried away when we speak. So yeah, but that was great. It was
Yeah, no,
amazing.
he's a brilliant mind as well, and he's a lot of fun to talk to. If you can get him, off topic, it's even more fun than when you try to stay on topic sometimes.
Yeah, maybe at the pub sometime when we meet face to face. Yeah.
So I was looking at some of the past interviews that you've given and some of the talks you've been on, and I think you say a lot of the same things that we're saying. That, persistence and having massive worlds, it's going to introduce game styles we've never even seen before. We can't really even quite yet envision what kind of things this is going to be. Am I fairly assessing the way that you look at the technology, where it goes socially?
Yeah, so I think I just want to touch on a couple of things you said, right? So even what you guys are doing with pixel streaming, I think what's really exciting is not just that you're doing sort of the rendering and the streaming of that, so you don't need a gaming grade machine. I think that that's something people have endeavored to do since even the mid 2000s. I remember services like OnLive. The issue has always been, are there enough GPUs you can make use of on the
Right.
clouds, for example? And is it cheap enough? And I think that's what makes your approach quite interesting, because making that cheaper is cheap enough that it starts to become a real viable option. That massively changes things, right? There's this effect in economics called Jevons law, right? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, but it's people think that when something becomes cheaper, less of it will get used. Like, if you make energy efficiency go up, governments hope that we will become greener, but people just start using more energy, right? And
Right.
sometimes much more energy, because it's now cheap enough for things that it previously wasn't cheap enough for. So we can use it even more than we did. We can use it for more things than we could in the past. So the opposite happens. And I think that's the interesting thing about, even things like pixel streaming, like there are thresholds, and when you surpass them, there's an explosion in usage. And to quite an extent, the core of what we offer is similar. Like what we've cracked is a third model of gaming backends. So traditional gaming backends were about, it's more client server or peer to peer, and we have a third model where we can make a massive amount of usage of nodes in the open internet, but we also augment that with edge and cloud. That significantly reduces the cost and the ops load and the management of it and so on. But at the same time, it provides all of the benefits of traditional client server. Now that makes, alternative gaming backends, what they can do with 10,000 to 40,000 CPU cores, our tech can do with like 600-700 CPU cores. So that's a massive increase in efficiency. But that also means that we don't need people to be thinking about those big games, which does take some vision to do, and there are a few people doing it, to come in through the door. But once they do, they have this entirely new opportunity set where they can scale lots of, Call of Duty sessions or Fortnite sessions very easily. But they could also build a massive world where I can build a village and grow it into a citadel and recruit thousands of players to live in it and wage wars with the neighboring kingdom. Designers have to figure out that design space, You don't have to out the gate to use our tech. You can just use it because it's the best networking tech out there, the cheapest to use, the easiest to scale, and so on. And then they'll discover that now I can build game modes that I couldn't before, and that's really, really exciting. Like what you're a designer, so what designers do with this, that's exciting. Right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. You were talking a little bit there about how the ease of using it. So I'm not sure if they walk you through that. Our vision really is to open it up. We know that the Unreal Engine itself, the tools are getting easier and easier. I tell a story all the time. My daughter's friend, who's I think at this point 10, builds games in Unreal because she's smart, she's homeschooled, and she just has Unreal at home. So it's gotten easier and easier for people to use. And what we have our system set up to be is the upload to our network is as simple as uploading a video to YouTube. So we expect over time that game designers and just hobbyists who have spent their time, making crafting their own experiences, they had the ease of putting it live and getting it in front of an audience without having to open up a Steam account and give 30% to Steam or the Apple Store, which steals 30%. This becomes now very easy to do. And then once we figured out that, wow, we could actually use the mobile game model, like we can use advertisements at the beginning to pay for their streaming costs. So it really becomes a free service. They get to put their games up for free. So how much does that open up for creativity and experimentation? I think, I lament my industry that I've been a part of for 25 years, just kind of going down a route where they make the same game over and over again. Everyone stays with the same IP because the risk of spending a bunch of money on a new IP and 3 years making a game, many studios won't take that risk because they've seen massive failures and massive losses. But at the same time, they're also not just doing innovative new gameplay styles, and that's kind of what we're part of the end that we want to get to is opening for that kind of thing. But then you throw into the mix the idea that your new innovative game style can also include a persistent world where you have 100,000 players all at the same time, interacting with it. I think, again, it's hard to say what all the things will come up, from that kind of interactions.
Absolutely. And, I'm here for the big persistent worlds and the living, breathing worlds that will eventually emerge, and being able to operate these worlds with the kind of accessibility you're talking about, where, you're just watching a few ads pays for the pixel streaming, and I don't need a game grade GPU. I can play it on my TV maybe at some point in the future. That's exciting. And getting adoption along that route, so people actually have the space. You need to get the fundamentals right, and then you start experimenting, not being too, not erecting too many barriers that you have to out the gate have an idea that needs the tech and needs to scale, is actually going to increase experimentation, increase the pool of people who are going to start playing around. Because now it's start building a game and now start playing around with ideas, and if you, like you said, if you find one that works, if you find the fun, then launch it and then work on the next idea and the next idea. That iteration, that's what's really going to lead to creativity, rather than having a big design up front that you come to the table with and you work on in a kind of dedicated long-term way. But of course, the really exciting games that come at the end, which are completely new genres that could not have been done before, that's what I'm here for. I want to see that. It might take a few years, but excited for it.
I don't know if you remember when Spore first came out, the Will Wright game. That was such a great game. But before, if you remember, before the full game launched, they launched the creature creator.
Yes,
and within it was like a week or so, there were more creatures created than exist species on the planet, on Earth, which was just fascinating. And you could see now. Imagine a persistent world where there's one application that's creating creatures that you can let loose in the world, and they say persistent, and all of a sudden you've got carnivores and herbivores walking around that people have created on their own.
Or you can throw evolution into it and shape how species start to occupy niche extinction events, and some that are well adapted start to find a niche, and the ecosystem achieves equilibrium over time. That'll be cool to see.
But then you have to wonder who's going to control things like earthquakes and storm systems, or maybe that's just something that the AI takes over, right?
Oh, yes. Potentially AI, or that could be the game. It could be a god game, right? Mess with nature, and then maybe the AI are the people in that world, and you're messing with them and how they react. Like Populous, I love that game. Populous.
Well, that was
the Pop 3, yeah.
Black and White was the same. If you remember Black and White.
Yes, Black and White. Yeah. So these. And you could switch roles, or you could have an AI as a god, and you could be the people on the surface. Yeah, so I think it's a super certainly a super exciting future. Like, who knows what's going to come out when people get their hands on it.
And we say that it, games is the place we're starting because that's already where people are expecting 3D worlds to exist. But I know that with our kids anyways, they've gotten so used to virtual value is the same for them as actual value.
Yeah.
My son will pay for a skin, and even though it's not something physical, he'll still pay money for it. He'll trade value for it. But we expect that things like social media and commerce, all these things will go into a 3D space over time as they get older, and they're looking for more than just game experiences. They'll look for social media experiences. My daughter will want to hang out with her friends in a virtual apartment, right, and play music together. And what kind of they'll buy virtual clothes and do virtual fashion shows and that kind of thing as they get older, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've obviously, we've just had a daughter. She's just turned 6 months. So I haven't, she's not buying stuff on Roblox yet,
but she will.
She will, exactly. And who knows, maybe it's not Roblox when she's grown up. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've heard of that phenomenon. It's crazy to me, but it's these are generational shifts, right? For kids today, they've grown up, they care more about how they look in Roblox than the real life, real life, for example. So it is a major shift. And so the value of these virtual economies, it's a completely new, you have to be that age, or I guess be a parent of children that age to truly understand it and to have a perspective. But yeah.
It is very helpful. My 13-year-old boy is very keen to see. He wants to run a node for YOM. He's very into. Actually, he's kind of a savant as far as like what hardware works with what other hardware. It's pretty fascinating to watch.
Nice. So you got tech support at home then.
Yes. My daughter less so, but again, still, I do expect that she's going to make that transition as she gets a little bit older. She's still young enough to not really notice it. But all right, so we should get back to the types. What do I have? I have here that we say that the 3D internet is inevitable. Right? We know it's coming. I talked a little bit about social media and commerce. Is that also part of what you think, or are you kind of agnostic to it? You just want to build the infrastructure that supports it in whatever form it takes.
So I believe that the best that we could do, us, is create some of our ideas of what certain applications on that internet will look like. But we're focused on building the back end, and we're building it for reasons to build certain types of games. Like the game we're building internally, Edge of Chaos, it's the kind of game that I wanted to build for a very long time, going back 20 years, just wasn't possible. It's that immersive, truly persistent world. So I feel like if we tried, I mean, there are some projects trying to build the 3D internet, and I'm skeptical of that. I liken it to, if you go back to the 90s, MSN was trying to be the internet, and AOL was trying to be the internet. They later pivoted and they realized that was futile. And I think trying to build one version of the internet is precisely that. And what you're really doing is building an island. It might be a massive island on the sea of other things that other creators will create, because you can't, it's transient exactly what will engage people and bring them together, and it'll shift in time, shift with innovation, with discovery, with creativity. So I think it's the wrong thing, but to try and build it, but to build parts of it and to build instances of it, I think that's what we're about.
So Matthew Ball had written in the Metaverse book. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but he says that in his mind, it's just a single metaverse, like there's a single internet. And it sounds like you don't necessarily agree with that. That you would say there will be multiple 3D worlds and different, or am I misinterpreting?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think back to some of his opinions. It's been a while since I'd say I'm not fully up to date on exactly what his current point of view is, but I'd say that I mean, surely the metaverse has to be built by, it should be the collective effort of human civilization as opposed to the effort of one company. So I think, I mean, you could have the equivalent of Facebook. I guess they are trying to do that with Meta Horizons, right? But
Right.
you could have, Meta Horizons obviously not as popular as Facebook, but you could have a landmark like that, and you could have something else, and there would be maybe a mechanism to transition between these things that's more seamless and immersive. Those things, yes, absolutely. right? But I don't believe that it will be one company that builds the metaverse and everyone just uses that app and it has everything, right?
Yeah, I think I would want to avoid the idea that you have a single online persona, right? Because then it becomes a little bit too easy to track it back to your real world. I still am holding on to anonymity online being an important thing, right? So, and there are times I'm going to want to be in a medieval world as a knight, and there'll be times that I want to be a big purple cartoon gorilla, and other places. And I think that we have to allow for the switching back and forth,
Yes.
or I'm trying to watch our comments because people are kind of chiming in. Yeah, and I think that Russ, frankly, just added in, I'd like considering virtual worlds as islands that we can hop between and see which one treats us better. And that's kind of good too. In the real world, right, we move around to live next to people we find we find common ground with, or we certainly form our friend groups with people that we have shared interests with. And you don't think that because there's no space to walk through, it breaks down the barrier of distance,
Right.
which it can be good and bad. All of a sudden, you could find yourself surrounded by people who, virtually surrounded by people who aren't treating you the way that you'd like to be treated, and you want to go to find some place where there is, and you can't easily when it's virtual.
Yeah. So actually, that is absolutely a good point. There's something about space because it's so intuitive to us that moving through space and spatial organization of things is very effective. It's a very effective model for us, and it lends itself to discovery. You walk from here to there, and you find things in between, and you find things around the things, at both ends. And I think those kinds of experiences do need to be preserved. I'm not sure yet exactly how that should exist. I mean, potentially there might be hubs that integrate other worlds and they provide experiences. But then the question is, should you have to commit yourself to one hub that integrates those set worlds? And you can't have it both ways. You can't be in superposition because that'll break the intuitions that we have and it'll become confusing. Maybe it's a question of maybe the browser of the future is the empty space, or not the empty space, but the transition. It creates the transitions between the things you visit. Maybe there's some protocol that's organizes things in a sensible way. I don't really have the answer, I think, but I'm not convinced that having only one version of everything is the right approach, if that makes sense. Alternatively, maybe someone needs to create the substrate and then there's only one version, but it's a collective effort. It's like, take an alternative example. Take the space of web URLs. People have to register them, and there's a registrar, and then you have all of these. Of course, you don't transition between them so seamlessly. Hyperlinks provide that, but you can't intuit from this URL from facebook.com. I can go to microsoft.com. But maybe there's something that's more spatially intuitive for how things are placed in the metaverse. But if one company controls that, that's a risk. So it has to be, and maybe that problem goes away. Maybe it's a decentralized network. So whoever figures that out first, maybe there's some value there. It's not a name service. It's a network that induces this kind of spatial representation, and then people can build within it, but they don't try and control the whole network. So it's an open platform sort of thing, right?
Well, the power of DAOs become, once taken into the decentralized, government becomes part of, you think maybe it's a good experiment that happens in that area.
Yeah.
Although something you said earlier that kind of made me think a little bit too, in another conversation I had this past week. When you can move from one place to another in a virtual world, and you don't, and you do it instantly, right? You don't have the 4-hour drive, right?
Mhm.
Which can be mind numbing a little bit, but then at the same time, that level of passiveness in your brain is great for thought and creativity and self-reflective.
Mhm.
I had again another conversation with my son about like he said, what did you do when you were younger before? Because I was old, young when there was no internet. So boredom played an important part of being creative, right? The idea that we would get bored meant
Yeah.
that we would have to find some ways to solve our own boredom,
Yes.
and then we got very creative. these days, I said, part of my concern for his generation is it's very difficult to get bored. It's very easy to fill your time, and then that mindfulness and that creativity is going to get capped.
Yes.
Does that all ring true to you as well? And then how does that affect us as we do more virtual worlds?
Absolutely. I have my best insights and breakthroughs when I'm on holiday and doing nothing, right? Sitting somewhere, just idling, just watching the sunset, or I'm walking somewhere. So I think that's absolutely essential. I do wonder, I mean, it's a great point when it's already the case where, I mean, we've got so many streaming services and I can't watch a single thing most of the time. I'm just looking through what to watch and go to
Right.
bed without watching anything quite often, and it's frustrating. And then the things I do watch are often the movies I used to watch back in like the 2000s and the 90s,
I do
because
that
that's an
same
easy,
thing.
I'll watch this movie again.
For familiarity, I know I can trust this
Yeah.
is going to entertain me, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the other stuff I can't choose. So too much choice is a bad thing. Whereas when you had to go rent a tape, it was a different thing. You really put it was an experience to pick the tape
Oh
and
yeah.
to then anticipate what the movie is going to be like by judging it, I guess, by the cover, which you're not
Right.
supposed to do, but that's what you do, right? Um, Now you can watch the trailer, you can read a review on your phone, and you just can't choose. So I do worry about the next generation and what's going to be like for our daughter as well. So my daughter, she's only 6 months, but we try not to let her watch dancing fruit on TV as much because
Right.
it's,
Right.
it's clearly very stimulating, and maybe that's not necessarily a good thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer. I mean, what's the solution to that? I really don't know the answer. But when you can move from world to world instantaneously, is there even a reason to take a route to get there? Right, the long route. That's
And
going
this
to
is
be
going to be again that experiment that I feel like people will come up with experiences that are for serenity or for just
yeah.
being peaceful, just being calm. You'll see
Mm.
worlds that you can go into, and again, when so I spent some of my years in VR. I published a number of VR games, worked for Oculus at the time. And as much as I love, and I'm not sure how much VR background you have, but as much as
I get motion sick, so I tend to
I
not use it too much.
and this has always been my point. The as much as I love it, I think mass adoption is far away, if ever, because of two things. The motion capture certainly, motion sickness is certainly one of them, and then the form factor itself. I think that it's
Yeah.
still very isolating when you put that on, and I
Yeah.
think that there's still going to be. But I can also see, and I've seen before, projects that are very helpful for people who are looking for a way to kind of relax and unwind. I know they use it for kids who are going into a CAT scan, right? Put them in VR and let them see birds and flowers as opposed to seeing a big tube go around them. Like all these things are super helpful. All right, so where should we take this conversation? So I guess, so we've announced our partnership between the two companies. I think really it's going to be a lot of exploration. How do our technologies work against each other? I think we'll be kind of on the lookout for a project that allows us to test where the two technologies play well together, and that'll be, down the track as well. But so that should be real fun. But what's next? So what are targets for MetaGravity? Like, what's the important near-term goals for you, and where should we be looking for MetaGravity to make the next strides?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've got a lot on our plate at the moment. We are doing a lot of work on Edge of Chaos, the game. We did our last playtest in November, where we did a stress test with 13,000 connected clients. We had players participating from 7 continents. We had one player from Antarctica, so we can make
Nice.
that claim. And it was the first time. I mean, it wasn't the first time because we did a few more before that, but this is the first game that's truly run a distributed simulation. So in the sense that the game is not running on any one server anywhere, it's a computation that's happening across data centers, cloud, edge, and client machines across the globe. We haven't kind of done any public PR on that, but the next one with updated graphics, animations, when we do the playtest, we'll also do a big announcement and world record for this, world record for that, world record for this other thing, these sort of claims. because this is 20 years of work to get to a point where we can actually truly distribute a computation across the globe and still synchronize it in real time and have a consistent experience for everyone. I don't think people participating in the playtest quite realized what a world first and a historic moment that was. But we want to polish it before we sort of push it out to the public, the public, the news and the media and so on. So that's a big one, and the team's working hard on the next iteration of that. And public access of our engine, our Quark engine, the SDKs next quarter. So we're going to start with a closed beta program for some indie developers, individual developers, and some friendly studios that we know, and some of the team worked at some of the AAA studios. So we're going to open up access so that they can play around with the SDK before we truly launch it to the world. And the third bit is really the reason that Quark is even possible and what we're building. Like, we're trying to build this 3D internet and try to build a backend for it, but it needs to be decentralized. And underlying all of that is the Spinor network. And so really bringing the Spinor network to testnet relatively soon and then mainnet shortly after is a big push for us. And I think people will be very excited because it's the kind of thing on which you can build massive scale simulation, but you can also do blockchain transactions, and you could build a real-time database. And we have some really cool SDK samples implemented already. So we're really looking forward. Those three things are occupying obviously all of our attention. So getting those, really coming out to the public with something, whereas up to now we've been working more with companies as opposed to pushing it out to the broader the masses. So that's super exciting. So we're really looking forward to that.
All right, all that sounds really good. The edge of chaos, is it a executable that people are installing and then playing, or how does that? Is that how?
At the moment it is, yeah. You would download and run the game locally. So maybe there's some sort of we could participate jointly on that. Maybe they don't need to download the game, so they could jump right in, and that might be easier to recruit for. Yeah. Mobile version, right?
That's of course where I was going, right? Like maybe that's a place that we start the integration and seeing if we can get people who are just on smaller machines and phones to be able to play as well.
Yeah, and the numbers we even hit last year would be a Guinness World Record if we were to pay Guinness the 50K and claim it. So we could, you obviously you have to do that stuff. They're a business at the end of the day, but we could, we could go and set a world record, literally be the record holders.
Yeah, we should totally do that. So do you have a top end number of what you feel like it can be done with the network?
With our tech, we can do, if you wanted to, we can do 10,000, we can do 100,000, we could do 1 million at this stage. It's just about up to the game design the map may not support 1 million. So between 10 and 100,000, we can make a map. If we believe we can get 1 million, we can just build a very big map. Say, all of them in. So 10 to 100,000 would be the target, but even 10K plus would technically be a record. But 15, 20K would be because the last record I set was like 10,000 with Hadian, my previous company, and with the Eve guys, it was with Eve Online. We built a spin-off. There were a lot of mitigating things that made that possible. Like there were spaceships, not 3D characters who move and twist and animate. And they fired torpedoes. There were no high-speed physics-based impacts. So there were some mitigating factors, and that was the limit of that technological approach. What we've got now, we could go as high as you like. The challenge is often recruiting players to sit in seats for a play test for an hour than the network can handle anything we'd like to throw at it. So if you've got a way to recruit lots of people, we should talk about that as well.
Yeah, we should. Very good. Okay, so I think we generally try to keep them into like 45 minutes, just so that people because YouTube just kind of favors that for talks. So anything else that we didn't touch on that I probably should go back and we should spend more time on, or how do you feeling?
No, I think it's good. I mean, I'm really excited for some of the stuff that we're talking about here, as well as the stuff we've got working in the background. So we should definitely. I think there's a lot of deep synergy with what we're doing, and really excited. And this is it's good to be working with you guys. And thanks for having me on this thing. I thought I needed a haircut and a shave before I did this. I've just been back to back, day after day. But I think it's good. It's good that we got this done. It's end of day here, so probably going to go and take a bit of a break. But yeah, this has been great. So thanks for having me on. It's been great, Jeff.
We very much appreciate it, Rashid. If everybody else is watching, if you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, please do that because we're doing more and more of these talks. I'll have the socials for MetaGravity down below in the description so people can check out what you guys are doing there and join the community, follow you guys on X and then when we get that call out there for 100,000 players, you'll see it on their Telegram or their Twitter and my Twitter.
Come make history with us, right? Let's do it.
Yeah, break a world record. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for paying attention. We appreciate it. Thank you, Rashid, for being a part of the show.